I want to talk a little bit about the Sacramento Kings. Last week, Sacramento fired head coach Mike Brown. For me, I would put the firing at around an 8 on the Shockometer. Sacramento was in the middle of a 5-13 slide, just had a homestand where they went 0-5. Some bad losses in there too. But the Kings did just give Mike Brown a 3-year, $25 million extension last summer. So it's a little crazy to pull the plug just like that. A lot of early criticism, Rachel, laid at the feet of DeAaron Fox. There was that weird video on Twitter where everybody was assuming Mike Brown was like saying goodbye to DeAaron. I don't know. That didn't seem like it to me. My understanding, though, from talking to people out there and around that situation is that this was not a Fox-fueled decision. This was really one that flowed from the ownership level. Vivek Ranadive was not pleased, understandably, with how the team was playing, and he was among the people that was interested in making a change here. And ultimately, he'd have to sign off on it because he's the one that gave him that brand spanking new deal. But the question now is, what do the Kings do about DeAaron Fox, who's got about a year and a half left on his contract? He has not signed an extension with the team just yet. Understandably, a lot of teams starting to clamor, starting to call Sacramento asking about DeAaron Fox. They have not made him available up until this point, but we do have a month plus to go before the deadline. What do you think the Kings' approach should be with Fox, with this team, over the months ahead?
I think, again, unless someone calls and blows you out of the water, they'll have a better trade market for him this summer. And I don't always say that because I think you get more desperate teams in the middle of the season. So sometimes you get better offers for guys in the middle of the season because, GMs who want to keep their jobs, that sort of thing. But I think in this case, some of the teams that could really use him and might make you a good sign and trade sort of situation are going to be looking more in the summer. We talked about the Spurs briefly earlier. And of course, I think that's the sexiest place for him to go because the idea of a Fox-Wemby pairing is just, it could be so fruitful, right? And that's a team that's not making that trade in the middle of the season. So there's a couple other destinations for him that do also feel like more of summer destinations. I also don't know if you intend to trade him away in February, you fire Mike Brown in December. Because if you are making some sort of deal for DeAaron Fox, don't you want your more experienced, steadier-handed coach for whatever's coming back in return? Don't you want him there for that, to be able to guide that ship and then maybe, kind of reassess over the summer? So I think that if you're looking for some big shakeup, big enough that you fire Mike Brown, you don't also give away DeAaron Fox. So I would think this is more of a summer move. Again, you never know in the NBA because someone picks up the phone and if the offer is too good to be true, you take it. But I wouldn't necessarily expect to see him on the move in the next month. And I will just say for the Mike Brown shockometer, I was pretty shocked. I might put mine up to 9 just because of, again, that contract that he got so recently. And I'm also just exhausted by the way these NBA owners are throwing coaches in the garbage can so readily. I think we're going to talk about Phoenix in a little bit. And Mike Budenholzer's great. And Frank Vogel's also great. And it's not his fault what happened last year. And the recycling seems to be on even such a higher level now. These guys are getting 1-year chances, 2-year chances. That's not what successful teams do. That's not teams that make the finals year after year. That's not what they do. And so Mike Brown won Coach of the Year recently. He got a big contract recently. I was confused that they let him go when they did. But I think if you are doing that, then you don't trade DeAaron Fox a month later.
Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes during the playoffs. Which players are going off and which ones are ice cold. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. With their pick'em game, you could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats, like yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and so much more. Underdog is the only pick'em platform that puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the Win Now button to cash out whenever you want. Every dog deserves a chance. And with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. This week on Underdog, I am looking at Lamar Jackson going higher than 2 touchdowns and Jamar Chase going higher than 9 catches. So Underdog is the best place to play Pick'em. Download the app, sign up with the promo code OPENFLOOR, and deposit now to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's promo code OPENFLOOR. Must be 18 years or older, 19 years or older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 years or older in Colorado for some games, 21 years or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado for some games. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpggambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. The homestand was really tough. The kind of losses they absorbed. Again, I don't disagree with you. Like I think it's crazy to fire a guy that had kind of helped this culture shift over the last few years. You know, got them into the playoffs, turned them around to a degree defensively. This season's been a struggle, but he's been a positive, had a positive impact on that team. And he just paid him, right? You just gave him a 3-year contract. You said, hey, thank you for all you've done. Here's 3 years, $25 million. And to fire him, 31 games into this season was crazy. That homestand, though, was tough to watch. I watched a couple of those games. They had 2 losses to the Lakers. They lost to Detroit. That was really bad, and that's where the DeAaron Fox, Mike Brown rumor mill got churning because of what Mike Brown said after that game. But it still is bonkers to me anyway to fire him. I wouldn't. They're not thinking about trading DeAaron Fox now because for starters, it's really tough to deal a guy with that kind of contract midseason. Like to your point, like
especially
it's
now.
It's more of an off-season maneuver, and you're going to start to see it. I think you already are seeing that the deals that are getting done and are going to get done are far more likely to involve the Dorian Finney-Smiths of the world, the Dennis Schroeders of the world, the guys that are making kind of that mid-level NBA money, which are just far more movable at this point. So I don't think you're talking about moving Fox now. I'm also not. There's a lot of people like worried about the contract extension. Like they're making the Donovan Mitchell comparisons from like, are we worried about you could go into a walk year next year? Like if the Kings offered DeAaron Fox like a max contract, you think he's not going to take it? Like really? Like this is not NBA 2000 and now 25. NBA 2025 guys take the money. 15 years ago, they would go into their walk year. But if DeAaron Fox is presented a contract from the Kings that is worth max dollars, which I would assume that he's going to get, he's not turning that down. What, he's going to risk, an injury in his contract season or having a bad year?
Hundreds of thousands, right? We're talking about just so much money going on, hundreds of millions of dollars. You don't turn that away.
No, you don't turn that away. So I'm not worried about that. Like he's going to get that contract. The guy I think they should be looking to deal is DeMar DeRozan. And I'm not beating up on DeRozan here because DeRozan is exactly what he's always been with that team. Like this is what they got. Like this is what they wanted. A guy that is a high level inside the arc player who does not have a 3-point game. That's just kind of the way DeMar DeRozan is. And he's been able to have a lot of success in his career at multiple stops being that guy. But when they made that deal, I know they didn't give up a ton. You deal Harrison Barnes, they didn't really want him anyway. They did give up a future first-round pick in 2031 that could be anything. It didn't make any sense to me, right? Like now you're going into a season where if you put DeRozan and Sabonis in the starting lineup, you're talking about 40% of your starting lineup that's not 3-point shooting. And I know that Sabonis is a 40+% 3-point shooter. He's attempting 2 per game. All right, so let's. He's not Kristaps Porzingis there. So I didn't understand that deal at the time because they already had a guy that was really good in the clutch. DeAaron Fox was the best clutch player of what last year. Like he handled those situations. They needed floor spacing. And the one thing they get with DeMar DeRozan is not floor spacing. So if I'm Sacramento, and DeRozan's got a good contract, it's like $25 million per year over the next 3 years. That's immovable. I can't believe we're talking about $25 million being nothing, but that's what it is in today's NBA. Like he's got a movable deal, and if you're a team that has enough spacing and needs a guy that can get you a bucket, that can give you an efficient 20 points per game, I'd be interested in DeMar DeRozan. This is not a DeMar DeRozan critique here. Like, this is not like, oh my God, DeMar DeRozan is really the cause of all their problems. He's exactly what he's always been. A really good scorer inside the arc who does not shoot threes. So if I'm Sacramento, I'm looking everywhere for some floor spacing, for some to shake things up. I'm not talking about DeAaron Fox. I'm not even talking about Sabonis yet, though that conversation might come at some point. But I'm talking about DeMar DeRozan, who didn't make sense when they made the deal last summer, and from what I watched, doesn't look like he makes sense now.
Yeah, I mean, look, the other thing to take into account here, though, is DeRozan is 35 years old. And we're talking about some older guys on this podcast. We're going to be talking about the Suns. You know, we'll talk about Jimmy Butler at some point. 35 years old in the NBA, I think we are getting a little distorted over LeBron's playing till he's 40. Tim Duncan played till he was 40. That's LeBron James and Tim Duncan. The average NBA player, and obviously DeRozan, Butler, a lot of these other guys are way above average, but the average NBA player only makes it to 29 before he leaves the league. So I also think with some of these potential deals, you trade them a guy that age as quickly as possible if you're going to deal him, because 36 looks a lot different than 35 and from there. So I just think that if that is the move they're going to make, they should make it before February.
Yeah, I think that's something. If they can get the right mix back in return, they should do that. Right now, the Kings are 25th in the NBA in three-point percentage. Like 25th in the NBA in three-point percentage, 16th in the NBA in defensive efficiency. Like, these are not metrics that, you know, foreshadow a big turnaround. And again, I want to be clear for aggregators or anybody else out there. This is not like blaming DeMar DeRozan for the Kings' problems. Like, he is, I'm looking at the numbers. He is quite literally the player they thought they signed. You know, last year with Chicago, played 79 games, averaged 38 minutes per game, shot 48% from the floor, averaged 24 points per game. This year, 35 minutes per game, playing in 29 games. So he's still durable. 49% from the floor, 21 points per game. So this is exactly what he's always brought to teams. It just doesn't work in Sacramento. It didn't make sense with the Sacramento Kings. So that would be the guy I'd be talking about with the Kings.